I'm Michael Arago, and I've just arrived at the Finlandsky station here in St. Petersburg, Russia, and I'm on a journey here to discover about democracy in America, and to ask the question, did democracy begin in America? The idea of the journey is modeled on a trip that the French sociologist Alexis de Tocqueville did in the 19th century. He came to the United States and he wrote a book called Democracy in America. And so I thought, why not come to Russia and ask people what they think about democracy, and particularly about American democracy and American values. So the plan is to go to visit some people at the university, to do some interviews, to talk with some students, and we have a discussion group planned, and to ask people their views about America and democracy. So that's the plan. I've got set up here. I'm really looking forward to it. I arrived here, everything looks really interesting so far, and hopefully it'll be a really good trip. So why don't you come along?
American democracy now is the best in the world.
I do think that democracy began from America.
Why do you think they might think that democracy began in America?
Well, in America, that's pretty much what they teach you in schools, I think, from a young age, but it's kind of an idea that we like to think that we started.
Okay.
So where would you say democracy began?
No, in Greece. In Greece.
One has to say it began with the Greeks, and then so it began there with demokrati and demos, the people, the idea of people.
The ancient Greece, something like 2,000 years ago, just based on the fact that the democracy means like people's power in Greece.
Definitely did not begin in America. I think there are aspects of democracy that we take from a lot of much older civilizations.
Democracy began, I don't have a lot thing to say about it because China have never had democracy. So basically I have no clue about it. But actually right now, just for now, democracy is branded by America.
It's maybe because it was a Republican form, Abraham Lincoln, by the people, of the people, for the people, that whole idea of actualization of it.
Why do people think sometimes democracy began in America?
Maybe they've got not enough information about that. Just like this.
Every European knows it started from Europe, from the ancient Greece, and just transferred with the people along when they were going to USA. It was like starting America.
Why do you think some people seem to have the impression that democracy began in America? Why do you think people have that impression, or is it not true then?
That's interesting. I don't think maybe folks who have this sense that I don't know. That's kind of I don't know. I don't know why people would say it starts in America. It's certainly isn't an American invention. I wouldn't I wouldn't even think that people would think that. But maybe because of all the press coverage of America. What is America doing? Spreading democracy?
Right.
One time I had a really good handle on what democracy meant. As a journalist, I really believe that a healthy democracy is dependent on a healthy media and a free and independent media, and the two of them are joined together. And that was my principle when I started international training. And then as I went out into the world, I realized that maybe what I was bringing with me and my ideals weren't so sure. And the older I get, the more clear I am about what is democracy and what role it plays in people's lives, because I don't see a lot of it around, really.
It's probably
really clear, huh?
could be a very good idea to prohibit this word in general. Don't use this term democracy, use something else. Or better just describe societies in the terms of the average lifetime and average education level and health and the creativity of nation and just marketing, all that stuff. It's better to understand what's going on.
Okay, this is it. I've arrived. I'm in St. Petersburg. This is Palace Square. This is the site of the revolution at the beginning of the century. The palace was stormed. This is the Winter Palace. It was stormed, and it changed the fate of the 20th century. we have democracy, we have socialism. The people use their voice and they use their bodies to come here and change the system. And so today I want to ask some people, talk to them about democracy today. Do they feel free? You know, in the square today we have people rollerblading, riding bikes, playing sports, and do they feel free today? So I'm going to ask some people what they think about democracy, and let's go do that.
Для меня демократия это конечно, сложное понятие, естественно. Но для меня это, конечно, чтобы государство во благо народа, чтобы так.
It's the best system which we've got right now. It's the best system.
Democracy is free and each person can to create his or her opinion.
Какая-то народность не стала доминировать над другим народностью, что демократия американская это современный этап развития человечества, современный этап.
And do you think so? Democracy and the values of democracy, they should be accepted in many countries around the world?
Yes, of course. Definitely yes.
For me, I do think that each country in the world have to be a democracy because everyone has to be free. You have to be free. She has to be free.
Все народности тянулись к Греции, потом Древний Рим. Все стали тянуться туда, потому что образец и так далее, и так бесконечно. Сегодня это США, конечно.
Each country has the same democracy values. No, it's not, of course. There's many types of democracy. Yes, I think yes.
They've got British democracy, they've got democracy in the other countries, and so people have to, you know, decide which example they had to take for themselves, like that.
Okay, so I had a chance to speak with a number of people here today, and they seem very optimistic about democracy in general, and the topic was raised very often about freedom and democracy. Is it important to have freedom in order to have a democracy, or once you have a democracy, does freedom then come along with it? And it got me thinking about whether or not democracy is just a political system or whether there's more to it than that. And I think that'll be a question that I'll really want to ask others on this trip to find out what's at the root of this question.
No, I don't think America's got any kind of monopoly on the recipe for democracy. I think it's a good idea that people, like I said, have a say or have the opportunity to have a say in who represents them in government, but I don't think that America's particular framework is the only one. Different nations have very different cultures and very different views on a whole set of issues, and they might have a whole set of issues that are just not part of the American spectrum.
In France, for example, living in a democracy means that if you're in, especially true now, if you are not happy, you can at every moment show that you are not happy. You don't vote just one time, and after that's all. That's it.
In China, the democracy is all on the base of we have to protect our own country, and on that level you can say anything you want.
This is a question about democratic values. You question what it is, but if we say we know what is this ideal, my question is, if a country or if people, narod, if the people accept democratic values, does that automatically mean they're also accepting American values?
I can say that democracy it's just positive. That's why it's dangerous. They feel in a good country, and they don't have to think. They don't have to think about. They don't have to care about other things. Democracy is like just something.
Enigma of God. It's like everything is absolute.
Everything is good. I live in democracy. I don't have to care about
poor people
else.
on the street or beggars on the street.
No, but they live
because
in a democracy.
They have a chance to vote.
In China, we think it's a kind of freedom, especially when you want to say something. because we cannot say it in China. Democracy is kind of, I mean, in some good way, people can say it's some human right. In some bad way, it's criminal. Because American can use any excuse to do some, to like say Iraq, you kill 100 people there, so it's not democracy. I can just make a war there. American promote the democracy because all the world people think democracy, the first word that comes to their mind is American.
Then you think about freedom of church. It's not so. And even if it's so, okay, it's probably about us. I'm sorry guys, it's finished.
It's not totally accept American values. It's not totally, but I think yes. I think yes, because I mean everywhere we need money, and everywhere we want power. So you got these two things, you got everything.
Alright, so I've met a bunch of people from different cultures, some Russians, some foreigners, and we talked about democracy as an abstract, as an ideal. People think that there's difficulties in implementing democracy. As an ideal, people seem to pretty much agree democracy is a good thing. But they want to know how it happens in different places at different times. And the key is you can talk about democracy not just about America. People really want to talk about democracy and find out what it is, what it means. And it means different things to different people, and that's been a really interesting thing to discover on this trip so far.
I think we're all struggling. All nations are struggling at what is democracy? How do we, involve the people? What is this public sphere?
The USA is like fairly democratic and fairly free state compared to many other states in the world. But after the 9/11, something happened in the USA.
That moves a lot of my comments is its foreign policy, because that seems to be what's bankrupting the country, number one, and it also it's undermining that credibility. I mean, what is democracy? Where you go and impose your point of view on another country, or your will, or your idea of democracy?
How can you combine these like cultural bounded issues with the political system, which democracy is in a way a political system?
There's a grand desire, I see, on the point of Americans to go around saying, you all have to look like us. Yet culturally, culturally so many countries can't understand the conflict-based culture, the materialistic culture, the religious culture of the United States. I come to less and less understand what democracy is if you have to judge it by the values of the United States. If that's the values of the United States and that's what democracy is, the people in ancient Greece would roll over in their graves because I'm sure this is not what they've envisioned.
The results of the election, it's not a reflection of all the people in this country. It's only the opinion of those people who got the energy and went and gave their votes. The election system which the USA, America is using should not be promoted to anywhere because it's like way too complicated for normal people to understand how it works. Democracy, it's not American ideology. Some Americans might want to think so, that it is, but it's not.
I think in theory it's a good model, but I don't know if everything is carried out exactly how we would define, the ideal of democracy to be.
Democracy, freedom, equality. In that point of view, these values should be distributed. But in the practice, it's a different story, I guess.
The American model just applies to the United States. It's not something that can necessarily just be forced upon somebody else. So while I do think it's important to encourage democratic processes, we have to have an understanding that it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in that country, or just having elections in a country doesn't mean they're going to have a democracy.
It's obvious that American model of democracy is not the best, is not perfect. There are more democratic countries, and why should American model of democracy be established all around the world? If we're happy and our system called not democratic, it's not important. I think that the current situation for all the world, it is quite important that Russia be a more democratic country than it is now. We don't feel any sort of compromise, we just feel dictating, just some advices. We don't feel that someone wants to know that we have our own opinion.
I think very favorably of American democracy, although I do recognize that it is full of its own errors. Certainly it's American democracy, and I have to emphasize that, is that each country, each society, better said, must develop its own form of democracy.
The idea, the principles of democracy are good principles. I think that anything that involves people that speaks to not only the majority but also the minorities, that works with them for the betterment of the public, then yes, that's important. And that's sort of some of the ideals of how we get there. It used to be so much clearer than it is now.
I say the international community, can promote, sometimes patronizingly, democracy, but the reality is that if the people in the country don't grasp it and promote it, then it will never foment itself. I think there are a lot of aspects of American and Western European democracy that could be, how do I say, looked favorably upon.
It's impossible to achieve. It's impossible to broadcast. It's impossible to force somebody to be more democratical.
The U.S. as a global leader and as a significant member of the international community should accompany the process of promoting democracy, but should also learn from its mistakes.
It's not known as a peacemaking country anymore. It's known as a war-making country, a country that's interested in countries with interest in oil. And, Haiti, who cares about Haiti? We're interested in Iraq.
Democracy for the average person, I think, in the United States is we, the people of the United States, have come together from all different parts of the world in the history of the 200 plus years that we've been around to form a union. And in that union, we vote for people who will then enact legislation that will protect us, protect our rights and our liberties. In the United States, the law, I believe, plays a big part in our concept of what freedom is. Basically, if you talk to an American about the American dream, it's like, can I become the president? Everybody can become the president in America. I can become the president. Becoming president.
No, but if the question is could be addressed to any person who desires to be a president. And I don't think that very many people would give a positive answer. The positive answer. So is democracy that good? I don't know.
Do you think that it is reasonable to let people vote for some person who wants to be president if they don't understand anything in, if majority of people don't understand anything in big politics?
Power of the people. Of course, it's like, I guess the weak point of the democracy is like, it's in a way, it's a weak system, because there's still like minority who is like thinking vice versa, and they are like, well, it's like a power of the majority in a way.
Well, for me, democracy must necessarily go beyond just elections. And it means not only addressing the day-to-day needs of a population, but it also means some of the basic tenets of a liberal democracy, which means representation, freedom of the press, rule of law, control of corruption, accountability to government and to people, etc., etc.
I don't know if they have a democracy anymore. I think it's when you have people that are saying we don't want to be in Iraq, and you have the people that are supposed to be governing on their behalf saying too bad. Is that democracy? I think not.
Human life and freedom and success and all that stuff. In the same time, they say that there is a paradise of a few countries who control the main resources.
It's just the same. We just support the government, and American society, they also just support the government, and they think that they choose something. But to my mind, there is no choose also.
American democracy is far from perfect.
Democracy is having a government and a society that works in the best interest of you and me. it's not in the best interests of maintaining power or world domination.
What's the most simple citizen can do? For example, can express himself on the power. It means that even if you are not somebody special, you can because you live in this system, you can influence the power.
I believe that everybody should be allowed to vote, even the people who don't have any education and who don't know anything about big politics, as you say, should be allowed to vote because it's their inalienable human right.
There is not just one American democracy. It's obviously because there is a political culture, there is a political identity and just mentality of people. It's very closely related with religious, sometimes traditional religions.
Also, like, I think democracy is combined also with Christianity, with religion in a way also.
The ideals of democracy are somehow confused with business. And until there's some clarity, separation between, state and business, it used to be church and state, now it's state and business, I'm not sure that people will believe.
In American state, it's better to say that it's controlling democracy, or it's controlled democracy, because it's question of manipulation by mass media. Old slang like TV democracy. It means that you know everything about your beautiful candidates by TV.
We have the cliche of the American who don't know what's happened around him. He just know what happened in the United States and
don't know and don't want to know that.
But he feels that he lives in a democracy.
Well, I think American values somewhat include democratic values. I think there's a lot more to American values and a lot more to democratic values as well. They're not necessarily one and the same.
American values, and
it's quite.
What is American values?
Money, maybe, no?
Money is it?
Is a big value for you?
No, I think the American values, it's totally different from French values, for example. It's more. This is a Russian value, for example.
I think when you define democracy, you're not only referring to the way that America views democracy.
I feel like an American chauvinist saying all of this a lot.
I'm not really sure what American values are other than, capitalism, world domination, aggression. Those are the things that most people see when they see the United States of America, and it's dressed up in democratic values and we're out to save the world. But, from the point of view of other countries, they're not out to save the world. I mean, the values of Sweden are not the values of the United States. The values of Canada are not the values of the United States. Although I'm not really sure what those values are when it comes down to the street at all.
Not American. We don't need this system because we can have our own system and we can just develop the system. We are taught in school that we can live on our own model and we don't need any other models because it won't fit this system.
A lot of it doesn't even have anything to do with most people who are going to work, who are, bringing home their paycheck, who are finding out they can't pay their mortgages anymore. Most of them, like democracy, is the furthest thing from their mind.
It's a country who make the people dream because they want to see that. They know that now it's getting bad, there's a war, it's many bad things. What is good in democracy is just that it's like a fantasy.
Like utopia, yeah? So it's a paradise for elected. It's a paradise for the best successful winners from everywhere.
A paradise for winners.
Now Europe is united actually, and Asia is going to be united partly, and America is a superpower, and nobody cares about Russia.
No, we care about Russia. We are in Russia, we're here.
Well, it's been quite a journey. We've had both positive and also negative answers about democracy and American democracy. And people have said, well, maybe there's not one single type or definition of democracy. Some people have talked about Russian democracy and said it's kind of rolling back its young democracy, while other people have said, well, maybe the United States is also, in a way, rolling back its democracy. So maybe a final question. What kind of democracy do you envision for the 21st century?
Land where my fathers died, land of the Pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom breathe. And the rockets red clear, the bombs bursting in the air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still